This is Prop Points on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
Hey everybody, welcome to Prop Points. I'm Jeff Erickson. He's Nick Whalen. We are with Rotowire.com. Got a heavy Final Four-centric show today. Here we're going to recap all the action that happened over both the Sweet 16 and the Elite 8. We're going to preview tonight's NBA slate. Adam Zdroik from Rotowire is going to hop on down and join us with his preview on some of the early lines for the Final Four. And then we'll talk a little MLB in the final segment there. Lots happening there as well. Nick Whalen, the Final Four is set. I'm of mixed emotions because we have 4 elite, awesome teams that made it. But the way they got there, it wasn't the most compelling to watch necessarily. Not too many close games, especially the Elite 8 games. Aside from Florida, these were smashes.
They were. And I'm glad we had college basketball this weekend to take away from what happened to the Milwaukee Brewers, who maybe we'll talk about later in the show. That does not bear mentioning in the first block here.
We don't want to torpedo the show.
Oh, goodness. Here we go. Already less than a minute in. Look, you're right. I think you set it up well because, I think we have what is on paper, statistically, arguably the best Final Four of all time. Obviously, it's the first time since 2008 that we've had all 4 number 1 seeds here. But these are high quality number 1 seeds. These are 4 of the top 10 teams ever in terms of KenPom. That goes back to the mid 90s. These are all kingpin teams. No result would surprise me whatsoever when we get to San Antonio this weekend. I suppose I would be surprised if any of these are full-on blowouts, but you could tell me Auburn beats Florida. You could tell me Florida beats Auburn. You could tell me any result in Houston Duke. You could tell me any of these 4 teams end up hanging the banner come Monday night, and I wouldn't be surprised. But you're right. We did see sloppiness, I guess, is one of the words that would come to mind if you're looking at the Sweet 16 and the Elite 8 games. We saw teams that didn't have to play their A or A+ game to get away with winning, right? I think we saw it in Auburn, Michigan State. I think we saw it in Houston, Tennessee. I thought Duke played an excellent game defensively against Alabama on Saturday, but that was not close to the best offensive game that we've seen from Duke. Now, they easily covered the 7.5, but they didn't really need Cooper Flagg to go off. We talked about that, Jeff, as a spot where it felt like by default, Alabama had to regress. They weren't going to shoot it at the level that they did on Thursday night against BYU, but I didn't think they'd regress that hard. 35% from the field, 6 of 32 as a team from 3. Mark Sears goes just 2 of 12 from the field. And really the big thing, Jeff, that stood out in that game to me, the size and the length that Duke presents. I thought that really, really bothered Alabama. Duke does not have a starter who goes under 6'6". Really got after the Bama guards. They were able to suppress Mark Sears. They were challenging everything at the rim. The way Alabama plays, you never really had to worry about foul trouble for Kaman Malawaj. So, Duke was one of a number of teams that didn't have to play a great game to win comfortably. And I think we saw the same thing in Tennessee, Houston.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk Duke here. I have some regrets. I don't have Duke winning at all in my brackets. I have Florida over Duke in my final. And after watching the weekend's results, I feel like I have maybe erred in that, especially because, and we saw this coming in, they were the only team in the tournament that was top 5, both in offensive and defensive efficiency, whether you use KenPom, whether you use Bart Torvik, either way, they were a historically good team and they're playing like it. The Arizona is the only team that's really given them much of a sweat at all. That was actually an excellent game. I thought that was one of the few good games over the weekend. I really enjoyed seeing Arizona raise their level. Caleb Love raising his level, and that team kind of rising up and kind of meeting the challenge, at least forcing Duke to sweat it a little bit. Whereas the Bama game, that was a squash. It was, I think, 11 at halftime, and it was over 2 minutes into the second half. That game was just done. And you just didn't feel like that run was coming. I know Bama's capable of it, the way they shoot the 3, but with Bama, it's always, okay, they can't get stopped, so they have to make their threes. Duke doesn't have that issue. Of all the teams, I feel like they don't have a weakness.
Well, I think the other thing with Alabama is, not only were they not hitting shots, but they just weren't able to generate the volume and the quality of looks that they had been earlier in the tournament, right? It's like, they were walking into wide open 3 after wide open 3. And you shot above your level, of course, against BYU. But for the most part, I thought the shot selection, the shot generation was really solid. And a lot of the attempts it just felt like they were in desperation mode, already early in the second half. And you never really got the sense that they were going to make that run. Now, if you're contrasting Duke with Florida, Jeff, Florida's had a couple of these games, right, where they've had to storm back. I mean, what we saw against Texas Tech was not quite. It wasn't quite UConn level. I never thought that Florida was in that level of peril. You're going up against UConn, but they were down 9 on Saturday night, Jeff, with 2:50 left in the second half. This was a 9-point game. Mm-hmm. Florida, rips off a 12-2 run, 4 consecutive 3-pointers from Thomas Houck and Walter Clayton, who was once again fantastic down the stretch. They end up closing that game on an 18-4 run. So they survive a rough shooting night. They only had, I think, 5 made 3-pointers prior to that late run. And, Texas Tech, you have some regrets in those last few minutes. A couple massive missed free throws on the front end of 1-and-1. JT Toppin and Darian Williams both missed the front end within a minute of each other. But it's tough to decide how to spin this for Florida, right? It's like, on one hand, you're a little concerned that it was that difficult against UConn. You're a little concerned that you played, below average basketball for 16 and a half minutes against Texas Tech. But at the same time, you also have to hand it to this team for being able to generate these runs. I don't know if there's another team in the country that could have pulled off that kind of comeback as quickly as Florida did.
Yeah, it was breathtaking. And I'm sweating it here because like I said, I've got Florida as my title team, and I'm just watching. We were out to dinner. I was watching the game on my phone, and it's just like,
love it.
Do I turn this off? Nope. Next thing, Kim doesn't care about, my wife doesn't care about the tournament at all, except if I have a chance to win money. And then she's like, "What's Florida doing now? What's the score now? Oh, down 7, down 4, down 3, up 1." Okay, wow, that it just was like that. It was crazy. And then we had the review, and then you're like, oh, come on, let's just end this game now and all that. Florida did get the benefit of a couple calls in their favor there too. So I thought that was interesting. They're a deep team. I think, unlike they might be the one team that isn't really reliant on one player. I think, with Duke, it's always Cooper flag this, Cooper flag that. Of course, we're going to be focused on that. Auburn, we saw them, pull away even without Jahmai Broome in there for a while there. That was one of those things. We'll talk about Auburn a little bit more in a sec. But whereas Florida, they're like 9-10 deep. And I feel like any one of those players could be the key player for them.
No question. And I think that is probably what separates Florida most from these other 3 number 1 seed teams, these other all-time elite teams in the Final Four. And, I think Duke has been able to roll for the most part without necessarily needing huge games out of Cooper Flag. Flag was just okay, over the weekend against Alabama. But, Tyrese Proctor came alive. He had been quiet against Arizona. You have other options for that team. So it's not just Cooper Flag. But yeah, the Jahmai Broome situation, I think, will be very interesting to monitor heading into, what will be just the second meeting of the year between these 2 SEC teams. He, of course, was injured about 5 minutes into the second half. I mean, that looked bad. Like he hyperextended both his knee and elbow on the same play. They're saying on the broadcast, man, he mouthed over to the bench, "I'm done," comes running back out a few minutes later. But that was the opportunity, Jeff, for Michigan State. Michigan State had right after Jahmai Broome went out, there was a point where Auburn missed 9 out of 10 shots. And Michigan State also went cold at the exact same time. I mean, that was the opportunity. When Broome went out, when there was that level of uncertainty, Michigan State didn't deserve to win, man. They shot 34% from the field. They were 7 of 23 from beyond the arc. Trey Holloman goes 0 of 10 from the field off the bench. But, Auburn, I thought, played well overall. They didn't play great. Right? I mean, had it not been for Jackson Kohler, hitting jump hook after jump hook, I think this would have been maybe a bigger blowout than the ultimate result. But Auburn was another one of those teams that played like a B+ game and was able to get away with it because of just a terrible shooting performance from Michigan State.
Yeah, how many times did we say it when we were doing Big Ten games, talking Big Ten games earlier? Michigan State's Achilles heel is the ability not to be able to hit the 3, and it kicked in at the worst possible time for them. So, kind of not a real surprising result when you look at it and frame it in that context there. We're going to take early look at the Final Four games and the matchups and the lines. But first, the tournament may be winding down, but the betting action never stops. Major League Baseball is back. NBA and NHL playoffs are around the corner, and the PGA Masters and NFL Draft are just weeks away. Stay ahead of every opportunity with the VSiN Pro subscription for just $9.99 and get daily best bets from VSiN hosts and guests, exclusive betting splits from DraftKings and Circa, 24/7 video access on the VSiN Watch app, plus our MLB season betting guide and upcoming Kentucky Derby betting guide. No matter the sport, VSiN Pro has you covered. Sign up now at VSiN.com/subscribe for just $9.99. That's VSIN.com/subscribe. Nick, are we sleeping a little bit on Houston? They're 4.5-point dogs against Duke. I know they Purdue gave them a dogfight, which is basically a home game for Purdue, which is kind of outrageous when you think about a 4 seed getting that sort of advantage. But It's down in San Antonio now. Is there any sort of, is that the geography matter, or is just, Final Four tickets so dispersed it really doesn't matter? What sort of chances are you giving Houston here?
Well, first of all, I think the geography does matter a little bit here, but it is Duke, right? It's a team with as national of a fan base as it gets. So I wouldn't expect this to be a totally Houston partial crowd. I mean, you look at what Houston did yesterday, held Tennessee to 15 points in the first half, the fewest ever for a 1 or a 2 seed in any NCAA tournament game in history, the fewest ever, regardless of seed, in any Elite Eight game in tournament history. But I actually thought Tennessee just missed a lot of good looks, missed their first 14 shots from beyond the arc, trailed by 19 at the half. And that was kind of it, never even got that down to single digits in the second half. But, my initial lean is on Duke here at 4.5. I would actually look at the over 136.5. I think Duke's efficiency on offense probably wins out here. 17 of the last 20 Duke games have gone over that number. We'll see, if Houston is ultimately able to drag them into the mud. And looking at Houston's last 20 games, by the way, they've gone over this number 7 times, which is more than I would have guessed. And, as always, Jeff, in these games, the battle and the rebounding will be huge. Like we talked about earlier last week, Con Malawach, getting in foul trouble really hurt Duke against Arizona. Strength on strength for these teams when it comes to the rebounding.
Yeah, absolutely there. So we'll see that there. I thought Tennessee looked like Clemson, a fellow orange-clad team in that first round game where they had 12 points at the half, 15 points by halftime for Tennessee. Tough look for me picking Tennessee over Houston to get to the Final Four. So we'll see. We're going to switch our conversation over to the NBA. You're watching Prop Points.
Watching Prop Points on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
Welcome back to Prop Points. Jeff Erickson, Nick Whalen here. Check us out on Rotowire, rotowire.com/VSiN. You can check out all of our NBA coverage. Big day in the Rotowire sphere. It is the last day of the Rotowire Stake League Basketball League. Big staff league there where they have a big Stake League dinner. Before we get into the slate, just tell everybody, the uninitiated, about the Rotowire universe, how important this is to finish in the top half.
Yeah, so this is a very unique fantasy basketball league, and we do this for football, we do it for baseball as well. It is called the Stake League because there is a stake dinner on the line, and this league is unique in the fact that, you want to win it, there's a small monetary prize, but really what you want to do is finish in the top half, because the bottom half of this league ends up footing the bill for the steak dinner, which does tend to get out of hand. Drinks are consumed, plenty of food is consumed, people are ordering things they would otherwise never order, and these bills have pushed north of $400 per person over the last couple of years. So the league ends today, Jeff. It's the final day of the season in the Rotowire Stake League. So after today, everything locks. There was a wild scramble on the waiver wire last night. We only have 8 games in the NBA tonight. So everybody's trying to load up on these random dudes who might just play 5 minutes, but hey, maybe they'll give you a block. Maybe they'll give you a steal. So I'm sitting in pretty good position, Jeff. I would have to lose, I think, 6 points in the standings in over 1 day's worth of games, which I don't think will happen, but I don't know. Crazier things have happened in this league, but I feel for the people at the bottom because it's fun to attend. It's fun to hang out. It's not fun when that bill comes.
Yeah, if you're trying to protect a field goal or free throw percentage thing, do you just bench everybody if you're you want to drop that? I mean, it's really tough gamesmanship to kind of do that sort of thing. Let's look at tonight's slate. Big game: Kings, Pacers. Sacramento playing their way in. Well, maybe Phoenix playing their way out. It's not quite the race to the bottom that is the Eastern Conference play-in battle there, but this is a huge game for the Kings. See if they can sneak in a road win against the Pacers.
Huge game for Sacramento. Indy is looking like they're going to be the 4 seed in the Eastern Conference. Could still slip to the 5, but in all likelihood, they'll be the 4. They're still playing hard, of course. But Sacramento, with Phoenix losing again last night, they lose by 39 at home to the Houston Rockets. Kevin Durant goes out with an ankle injury. He could end up missing some time. There's an opportunity here for the Kings to steal a win. They are 5.5-point dogs tonight, but they need this one. Could put a full 2 games between themselves and the Phoenix Suns, who do still have the toughest remaining schedule in the NBA. Those 2 teams, by the way, do face off in game 82, Kings and the Suns. So it could come down to that. But again, with Phoenix losing last night, I think we'll see a motivated version of the Sacramento Kings. They play Washington and Charlotte after this. With all that said, Jeff, the Kings have been playing very bad basketball of late. They're 3-9 straight up in their last 12. Yeah. So I don't know if I have the cojones, if you will, to take the Kings in this spot. I certainly wouldn't play them on the money line. Could see them covering here. I do think this should be a good spot, though, for Domantas Sabonis. I'm looking specifically at the over 31.5 points plus rebounds. Indy is actually a team that does very well limiting opponent assists. They're number 2 in the NBA in that category over the last 10 games. So just going to kind of stay away from the assist part of this. But Sabonis went for 17 points and 21 rebounds in the first meeting earlier this season. Did that in just 31 minutes, shot only 8 of 22 from the field. Indy, not a great rebounding team, and Sabonis has traditionally gotten the better of Miles Turner in that matchup.
Yeah, big revenge game for Sabonis there. No Ben Mathurin for the Pacers either. He also sat out Saturday. Pacers got blown out by OKC. No shame in that, but still not as bad as like Sacramento losing by 30 to Orlando like they did on Saturday. That was pretty awful there. Yeah. So we'll move on to the next game here on our slate, and that's Clippers Magic. Back-to-back game here for the Clippers. What happens? Do you think we get Kawhi since he sat out with the previous against the Cavs? I think that's a pretty big key to this game here.
Well, first of all, I did just get a notification on my phone, Jeff, that Miles Turner was just ruled out for tonight against Sacramento. So that pushes me even more toward
Mathurin, no Turner. That's big.
Yeah, that is big. That is big. Dealing with an illness is Miles Turner, so he's out tonight. Clippers Magic, though, this number is actually shortened up a little bit. It's now down to 2.5 in favor of the Clippers. It is the second night of a back-to-back. It is a road back-to-back, but they did play early in the day. That was like a 2 p.m. Central tip yesterday against the Cavaliers, and almost won that game on the road without Kawhi Leonard. So with Kawhi sitting yesterday, I think the expectation, of course, is that he will be back out there tonight. I think one thing that's been encouraging for the Clippers is Norman Powell coming back from injury is starting to look like early to midseason Norman Powell. Had a few games where he was looking like he was a little rusty, but he looks like he's back in form. And I think we're getting a pretty good number on Kawhi Leonard's points prop tonight as well, 21.5 at the DraftKings Sportsbook. When the Magic are involved, you worry about the pace. Both of these are two good defensive teams, but again, Kawhi didn't play yesterday. He should be fresh. He's gone over this number in 8 straight games. I think, Jeff, this is the closest to, old peak Toronto, peak San Antonio Kawhi that we've seen in a long time. I mean, he's not really had any hiccups with that knee. Fingers crossed that continues into the playoffs. But you look at his last 8 games where I said he's gone over that number in all 8. He's averaging 27 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists on 59, 56, 85 shooting splits.
Nice. Is it replete with the weird trash talk too? He's always known for that kind of when he's grooving, he just says these random things. It's pretty funny. I love it. Love hearing about that. But I'm intrigued to see this game. Should be a fun one. The game. This is the next game. I think this is maybe the most interesting game in the slate. Is the Celtics Grizzlies. Celtics on fire. Grizzlies obviously with the bizarre coach firing on Friday. It looks like Ja Morant, who magically appeared over the weekend after they fired their coach. Although there has been no confirmation that he's responsible for it. But I mean, Memphis is like this super intriguing team right now to me.
Yeah, I think you could spin it in any direction. They're intriguing when they're on. They look like certainly a top 5 team in the West. When they're off, they look like they might fall into the play-in. The big thing to keep an eye on here is Jaylen Brown is currently questionable for the Boston Celtics. Memphis should have just about everyone. Like you said, Ja Morant made his return over the weekend. Ended up losing a high-scoring game to the Lakers, so we didn't get the post-firing bump necessarily. For me, I would look at the total here, 235.5. I would look at the over, mostly because of how Memphis plays. They've just been an average defensive team since the All-Star break, but they're top 5 in the NBA in pace. And the Celtics are kind of like Duke right now, Jeff. They don't play overly fast, but they're so hyper efficient offensively that they'll still put up big point totals. If you're betting an under against the Celtics, you're always worried about one of those nights where they go 20 of 50 from beyond the arc. This could be one of them. Memphis gives up a ton of threes. Opponents are shooting over 41% against the Grizzlies from 3 over the last 10 games. 4 of the last 6 Grizzlies games have gone over this number. Over in 8 of the last 12 in which Ja Morant has played. So I look at the over here, and then if you're looking for a prop, Derek White over 4.5 assists, especially if Jaylen Brown, isn't out there. And would also look into Jason Tatum as well. Toying around with over 3.5 threes at plus money. Took 10 last time out against Memphis. Hit only one of them, but the attempts at least were there.
Would you ever consider toying around with like going the team total on Boston, given their style of play? They're hyper efficient. Maybe they're not super fast, but instead of trying to go with an overall total number based on pace of play, try to just get the Boston side.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Team totals 120.5. Totally good with that. I'd look into the same thing, in that Chicago OKC game where we got some injury questions for Chicago. OKC is going to show up. Bulls play super fast. So if you're worried about one end of the game holding up, its end of the bargain, totally fine going to the team total market. OKC's number tonight is 127.5 if you're curious.
All right. Very good. We'll talk a little bit more about that Bulls Thunder game, but first, looking to stay ahead of the game, Rotowire has you covered with expert analysis, real-time updates, and the best fantasy and betting tools in the industry. Whether you're making picks, setting your fantasy lineup, or placing bets, our award-winning insights give you the edge you need. Get started today at rotowire.com/VSiN and take your game to the next level. That's rotowire.com/VSIN. Let's talk a little Bulls and Thunder. The Thunder are just a wagon. They go and just kind of go through everybody. It's just they continue to do that. Bulls, on Thursday night, they had that incredible comeback against the Lakers. Looks like Josh Giddey, who's dealing with that hip injury, he looks like he is good to go. Latest note I'm seeing from Casey Johnson of the Chicago Sports Network there. So good news on Giddey there. I still can't get over the ending of that Lakers Bulls last week, Nick. We had it on, I was at a casino and they playing a little poker and they replayed that game. And there are various points in the game. I keep on how do the Lakers lose this game? Even Giddey misses that left-handed shot. They get they make 2 free throws. It's 115-110. They still find a way to lose the game. Anyway, I just wanted to talk about that briefly before talking about tonight's game.
Yeah, so we got a big number, of course, in this game. It would be one where I would consider, taking a look at that OKC team total. Although, Josh Giddey is going to play, which the Bulls are telling us that does matter. Game totals up to 239.5. We do have some questionable situations on the OKC side. Chad Holmgren, Isaiah Hartenstein, Jalen with an I, Williams, all questionable. But really right now you're looking for points here. This is an overs game for me in the prop market. Chicago, number 1 in the NBA in pace. They've actually been decent defensively, but still, of course, giving up a ton of points. When I thought Josh Giddey was not going to play, this would have been maybe an under spot for me. But with him out there, I do think Chicago could keep this somewhat close. However, maybe take a look at OKC minus 8.5 in the first half. They have been the best first half team in the NBA, plus 12.7 margin in the first half over their last 3 games. Chicago has tended to struggle in those situations. And if Isaiah Hartenstein is out there, over 0.5 blocks, that's my favorite prop in this one.
Very good. All right, we're going to shift back over to the Final Four. Adam Zdroik is going to hop on down the best line. This is Prop Points.
You're watching Prop Points on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
Welcome back into Prop Points. Nick Whalen, Jeff Erickson hanging out with you on this Monday. Give you a quick score update in Major League Baseball. A couple of games in action. The Milwaukee Brewers, Jeff, picking up where they left off out in New York this weekend, down 3-0 as we head to the bottom of the first. Chicago, the White Sox, out to a 3-0 lead on the Minnesota Twins, about to head to the top of the second there. And we're about 5 minutes from first pitch between the Red Sox and the Orioles. We'll have more baseball bets for today's slate coming your way later in the show. We're going to talk some college hoops, look ahead to the Final Four, talk some takeaways from the Elite Eight. To help us do that, we have one of our college basketball experts over at Rotowire.com, Adam Zdroik, joining us on the Progressive guest line. Adam, a lot of talk about chalk. We got 4 number 1 seeds heading to San Antonio. All 4 favorites ended up winning in the Elite Eight. So nothing shocking necessarily coming out of this weekend. But when you look at the 4 Elite Eight games, Tennessee, Houston, Michigan State, Auburn yesterday, Texas Tech, Florida, Alabama, Duke on Saturday, again, maybe the winner is not surprising to you, but was there any result that surprised you in terms of the way the game played out?
I think probably the Florida Texas Tech game. I mean, first off, we have Texas Tech missing those 2 front ends, and the fact that Texas Tech they dominated to an extent down low with Darian Williams and JT Toppin, those guys both 20 plus points. And I think that is going to be an interesting matchup against Auburn coming up with Janai Broome and Caldwell. And just that matchup between Florida, just another game. They got that scare against UConn, ran away from Maryland a little bit, but they just didn't really have it until the end, till Clayton took over in the end. I think that was, it was the best game of any of the Elite Eight games. But just the fact that Florida just didn't really have the defense to handle, a couple, I wouldn't say big of 4 and 5, but just built a solid Texas Tech front line. So I think that's going to be an interesting matchup to see what this Florida front line can do against them, against Auburn, that is.
I want to go back to Friday night, Houston-Purdue a little bit there too. I thought that was one of the most compelling games of the week, and maybe the most. Love the inbounds play at the very end drawn up by Sampson, which he wouldn't have had time to do but for the lengthy review that we keep on doing to check to see if, first of all, possession, and see if we have 0.8 or 0.9 seconds left or anything like that. It's still really frustrating. It's a free timeout for coaches.
Yeah, college has a lot of things like that. All the reviews that happen at the end of games, it's no one likes them. No one likes when they happen. You got to review every single small thing, and you got to get it right. And you had the offensive foul that the Purdue fans wanted on that last play there. That would have, obviously, the game probably would have went to overtime if that wasn't called. If that was called. But that was, I'm sure a lot of people coming on this show just saying, okay, Houston gonna control this Purdue team. That was an interesting game. And then Houston just, they took care of Tennessee in their next one. So I think that Purdue one it was a lot of Matt Painter coaching in that one. Braden Smith, 15 assists, one of his better games of the season. I know he didn't score a bunch, but we had interesting games. I know it's all chalk, but these have been the 4 best teams throughout pretty much the entire season. So at the end of the day, I've heard people calling this maybe the best Final Four ever. And it might be. Hopefully there's going to be some good games we get.
Adam, you are a Michigan State alum, or Michigan State insider. Obviously, I know you may agree that this is the best Final Four ever. My guess is that you would prefer that Michigan State was a part of it. But we were talking about that game against Auburn earlier in the show, and watching this from a Michigan State perspective, you follow this team as closely as anybody. How frustrating was it to see Auburn, play well, but not that well, right? Auburn shot 42.5% from the field. They're 7 of 25 from beyond the arc. I think if somebody had told you that pregame, hey, here's what you're going to hold Auburn to, Johni Broome is going to miss time in the second half, I think you would have felt pretty good if you were Michigan State.
Yeah, I got that fake injury there for Johni Broome. Yeah, it wasn't. They missed so many layups. Michigan State missed so many layups, and maybe, at least I'm not a Texas Tech fan, is kind of what it comes down to. Yeah. At least it doesn't sting, give away a lead like that. They were, Michigan State's defense came through. They stopped the guards. They held the guards for the most part. They just couldn't make layups. They couldn't make threes. They couldn't make open threes. And at the end of the day, it's too bad. But that Auburn team is kind of a little disappointing. They had that run against Michigan in the second half against Michigan to take the lead. But, before that, the first 30 minutes of that game, they didn't really look like the same elite team that we've seen all season. In the first 2 games, they didn't really look like the same elite team. So what are we going to get between Auburn and Florida? I think that's going to be an intriguing SEC matchup. These teams already played. Florida won 90-81 in that game. Also, Broome did come back. I will say, I don't even think I saw him move his right arm after he came back. He was basically rebounding with one arm in the post-game celebration. Like, he had his arm off to the side. He wasn't moving it. I know he's come out and said nothing to worry about. I feel all good, but I think that's going to be something to monitor here. Maybe, I don't know if it's a dislocated shoulder. I'm just, making up injuries here, but the fact that he couldn't move his arm, I think, is pretty relevant once we get to the Final Four against a Florida front court that is deep. They have 4 guys, basically 4 different bigs to throw at Broome, and one of them's 7'2". So you got a variety of guys that Florida can throw at him. So just that interesting matchup overall. And then the Auburn guards against the Florida guards, Clayton has had his moments, Pettiford has had his moments. I like the fact that both these teams want to play up and down. I think it's going to get a little crazy here and there with their guards, but Clayton, Pettiford, those guys showing up will be a fun matchup as well. Just an overall fun game, front court, back court, all of it.
Houston, Duke. I think Duke's got a lot of different ways to win. I think Houston, they need to crash the boards. I think we've seen with Duke sometimes in the Arizona game, they got a little bit of foul trouble. And Arizona did crash the boards. Can Houston make a run doing that against this Duke team that's so big?
I don't think so. We got an updated spread here, -5.5. I mean, that's pretty disrespectful, I'll say, but people are going to keep throwing money on Duke. I think the spread at Ken Palm is 2 points, but yeah, the overall size of Duke, you almost look at this and it's like, you can't bet against Duke. With the smaller guards of Houston, Cryer had problems against Purdue. I know they're all hitting threes against Tennessee, a pretty good defense, but this Duke team's a little different. I was kind of looking at some prior opponents for Houston, and one team you can kind of, to an extent, compare to Duke is Texas Tech. Duke is just like a bigger Texas Tech. Darian Williams, maybe a smaller, thicker Cooper Flag. JT Toppin, maybe compare him to Malawach a little bit like that. And both teams kind of play with the same kind of pace. And Houston had some trouble against Texas Tech this season. They lost. One of their losses came against Texas Tech, and Texas Tech wasn't 100% healthy in those games either. So I think I was looking at those matchups, trying to figure out, how is Duke going to attack this? They played fast their last couple of games, Alabama, Arizona. Now it's going to slow down against Houston, and they've slowed things down at times this season. The ACC is kind of a fast conference. Clemson is one of those teams that can slow it down. But I think this Duke team is better than the one 2 months ago, roughly, that when they lost at Clemson. So I think, they have that kind of in their back pocket, games against Clemson and Virginia. They know how to play slow. They also have size to where how is Houston going to mark up Cooper Flag? How are they going to deal with a 7-2 guy like Malawach, who has really come on in the tournament? It's a fun matchup, but at the end of the day, it's hard to bet against Duke because they have size at every position, and you're bringing the 6-foot guards of Houston and a small forward in Sharp, who's only 6'4". So I like the size aspect of Duke.
You want to know where the money is really coming in? Unlike other sources, our betting splits at VSiN come straight from Circa and the DraftKings Sportsbooks, giving you insight into where all the sharp action is landing. Circa, of course, is known for taking big bets from pro bettors, while DraftKings provides a broader market perspective. So that means you're getting the real action, not just public money, but the kind of wagers that move lines. You can see the percentage of bets versus the percentage of handle on every game across every major sport, helping you make smarter, more informed bets. Go check out VSiN's exclusive betting splits for as little as $9.99 for your first month. You can do that right now over at vsin.com/subscribe. I have that fantastic betting splits page up as we speak, and I can tell you 83% of the handle at DraftKings coming in on Florida to cover, 88% of the money coming in on Duke. Talking with Adam Zdroik, joins us on the Progressive guest line. Adam, we got about 30 seconds here. I do want to ask you, we have some women's tournament action coming up tonight. I'm looking at this UConn-USC game. Obviously, Juju Watkins goes down with a torn ACL. Any chance USC can hang in with UConn without Watkins?
I don't think they're going to win, but this line at 14.5 is nuts. It's crazy. USC won at UConn earlier this season, and UConn was a 7.5 point favorite. I think 10 points, 11 points you're giving Juju Watkins, who's out, is too much. I think USC can get it under this 14 point number.
All right, there we have it. Adam Zdroik. Everybody go check out his great work for us over at rotowire.com. We're going to switch gears over to baseball. We got 3 games in action. We're going to get all of Jeff Erickson's best bets for the Monday slate coming your way next here on Prop Points.
Watching Prop Points on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
Nick Whalen and Jeff Erickson back with you here on the Sports Betting Network. It's Prop Points. It's time to talk some baseball, Jeff. We got 14 games in MLB coming our way on Monday. 3 of those games in action already. Royals have now pushed their lead up to 4-0 over the Milwaukee Brewers. Home opener for the Crew. Rough start for Milwaukee. 3 up, 3 down in the first inning. All 3 of those batters struck out. Chris Bubich having a nice outing so far for the Royals. Through just 1 1/3, but already 3 strikeouts for him. And the Chicago White Sox, Jeff, opening up an 8-0 lead in the bottom of the second over the Minnesota Twins. Just had first pitch between the Red Sox and the Orioles as well. Jeff, I know you got some best bets for us, but one thing I do want to ask you about coming out of opening weekend, this torpedo bat. My Milwaukee Brewers were on the receiving end of a brutal series against the Yankees out in New York. Yankees put up 36 runs over 3 games, obviously put up 20 alone on Saturday. The torpedo bat, is this something that we actually need to be talking about, or is this something that is completely legal? And a week from now, maybe we'll see other teams around Major League Baseball using it.
I think it's both. We need to be talking about it, and teams need to be using it a little bit more. Hey, I like seeing innovation on the hitting side. This is good. Good for baseball. We need more offense. Run scoring. Even with the Yankees going crazy on that Brewers pitching staff, as we're seeing today, it may not be just a Yankees thing, but yeah. I think it's good. We've seen so many more advancements in the pitching side of things. People going to driver line, seeing it's not just adding velocity, which they're actually doing, but also all this crazy horizontal movement we're seeing with these pitchers, these sweepers, with these ghost changes and other things like that. Yeah, I like seeing a little bit of hitting advancement there. And by the way, Aaron Judge, he's just doing it on a normal regular bat. The thing about this torpedo bat is 2 things. 1, MLB ruled it legal. It's fine for them. 2, it actually started at the end of the year last year that this innovation started. It's becoming a little bit more widespread with the Yankees. We just learned about it. That's the thing with baseball sometimes is we find these things out after the fact, like, would have been nice to know this sooner. But it's also, when you look at some of the players that have benefited from it there. Anthony Volpe had a 2020 season his rookie year. It's not like he's a completely powerless guy. Jazz Chisholm's had power before. Goldie, Cody Bellinger, I almost said Clay. All these guys have been known to hit for power in the past. So it's a great innovation. I hope it means something, in the long run there. It might just be that they were there when the wheel went round against this Brewers pitching staff that looks pretty awful so far.
All right, let's move over to Red Sox O's, Jeff. That game in progress, still in the top of the first. Plenty of time to get some live action in on this game. Orioles currently minus 180 on the live line. This is Sean Newcomb for Boston going up against Cade Povich. I know you got this one in before this started, Jeff, but you're looking at a Tyler O'Neill anytime homer in this game. And maybe before you give the explanation on that, some big news coming out of opening weekend for the O's on the injury front.
Yeah, the Orioles just lost Colton Cowser yesterday, a broken thumb. Today he got put on the IL, and they said minimum 6 to 8 weeks for his absence now. So huge injury for the O's. We're already without Gunnar Henderson. Henderson should return on Thursday. But yeah, that's a massive loss. Cowser had a nice little rookie season, second in Rookie of Year voting in the American League. Now, they were kind of counting on him being the leadoff hitter against righties. They're without him. Means Heston Kierstad's going to play a lot more. Ramon Laureano might play a lot more. They just called up, another outfielder to add to the pile there. But it's another link in the chain that's removed for this Orioles team that's kind of had a rough injury start to the season there. I do like Tyler O'Neill today against Sean Newcomb. Pitching for he's only thrown 25 major league innings in the last 2 years. Not really much of a guy that we're expecting much from. Now we expect, O'Neill against that lefty with the fences back in Baltimore. I like him having an anytime homer for plus 340. Homered on the road opening day for the sixth opening day in a row. Let's see if he can do it in his home opening day as well. Just
outrageous stat on Tyler O'Neill getting insane. That anytime home run at plus 340. All right, let's talk about your Cincinnati Reds, Jeff. They are home for the Texas Rangers. Solid opening weekend for Texas. They come into this one 3-1. Kumar Rocker going up against Brady Singer. And I am intrigued, as many are in the fantasy community, Jeff, about Kumar Rocker. Up and down, mostly down in spring training. Did have some big strikeout games later in spring training. We know what he's capable of, but we know this is also a high-risk, high-reward proposition anytime he's on the mound. So how does that influence how you're betting this game?
Exactly. A lot of risk in the strikeouts. I mean, a lot of reward in the strikeouts, a lot of risk in the walks. You can have a lot of different, end results here as far as that goes. Reds they don't really strike out a ton. 21.4% strikeout rate. That's about 21st in MLB, 18th in MLB. Excuse me, I got that wrong the first time. But they're not hitting great so far. Ball wasn't carrying early on in Great American Ballpark, but yet that bullpen is a little soft for the Reds. The Rangers bullpen has actually gotten a lot of work from their primary relievers. I wouldn't be surprised if you see the likes of Chris Martin Luke Jackson and maybe even Robert Garcia all be unavailable for tonight's game, which means I think you might see some late scoring. That's why I kind of like the over 9 runs, and maybe not play the early, first 5 innings or anything like that. But I do think it'll be interesting late on in this one. The Reds are going with Brady Singer. Singer actually has been generating a decent amount of ground balls over the course of his career. So I'm not sure that they're a huge risk there, but Adolis Garcia is off to a good start for the Rangers. 2 homers already. Nice little bounce back after a down year from last year. So let's go for the late run scoring. Go over 9 runs here.
All right, getting that at almost even money at the DK Sportsbook. Reds plus 110 on the money line. Rangers a minus 130 favorite. Let's take a look at Guardians Padres, Jeff. Luis Ortiz going up against Kyle Hart. This one coming to us later tonight. It's on the road in San Diego. Padres minus 135 on the money line. Guardians plus 114. What are you looking at here in the prop market?
So I'm looking at the starting pitching matchup between Luis Ortiz and Kyle Hart. Hart hasn't pitched in the majors since 2020. He spent last year in the KBO, had a meteoric rise in his K rate, up to over 28% strikeout rate. Like seeing that. However, Cleveland is a team that does not strike out that much. Lowest in MLB at 13.7 so far in 3 games. So I'm going to play the under Kyle Hart 3.5 Ks prop minus 102 there. I think people want to jump on with the 2 start here in fantasy, and that's fine, especially with the home start to begin his slate here. But I'm going to take the under on the strikeouts. It's never fun being an under better. You always have to sweat it until he's out of the game. But I think these 4th and 5th starters, and in the case of Hardy, is a 5th starter. The Padres have already played 4 games. They sometimes have a shorter leash too. If things aren't going well, they might pull him a little early. So I'm going to take the under on the strikeouts there for Kyle Hart.
All right, let's hit one more game, Jeff, before we get to our G-Bank best bets of the night. The Detroit Tigers heading out west to take on Seattle. We got Emerson Hancock going up against Jackson Jobe. Seattle minus 120 on the money line. Tigers plus 100. And we talked about the volatility that someone like Kumar Rocker brings every time he's on the mound. I think you could say the same thing about Jackson Jobe.
Yeah, Jackson Jobe is James Anderson's number 14 prospect overall in the Rotowire recent update on their prospect rankings. You can check that out for yourself, rotowire.com/VSiN for a free trial to check out those prospect rankings. Highly recommend if you're into the prospect game at all there. I like the alt strikeout line, though, for Jobe, because I do think this is a team that strikes out a lot in Seattle, 30.4% K percentage. Slow hitting start for this team. I also maybe like the over on the walk line as well for Jobe. So maybe a little bit of both as far as that goes. High volatility, as you alluded to with Jackson Jobe.
All right. Well, if you want to trail Jeff Erickson here, the over on that 5.5 strikeout alt line plus 160. Jobe to issue at least 2 walks, minus 130 over at the DraftKings Sportsbook. Best bets of the night are brought to you by G-Bank, the official bank of VSiN. And G-Bank is up in the ante with up to a $750 bonus for new G-Bank Visa Signature Card customers. New customers who spend $1,000 on eligible purchases within 90 days from account opening receive a $250 bonus. And if you spend $50K on gaming and sports app loads within 30 days of opening your account, you'll receive another $500 bonus. So potentially $750 in bonus cash coming your way via G-Bank. You can apply now over at VSiN.com/GBank. That's VSiN.com/GBank. Subject to credit approval. Terms and conditions apply. Jeff, we kind of ran out of time on Braves Dodgers tonight. I know you're looking at the Braves team total under 2.5, getting that at plus money. Will that be the best bet of the night, or is it one that we've already mentioned from Major League Baseball?
I do like that, especially with Tyler Glasnow making his season debut against a slumping Braves team. But my best bet is the total in that Reds-Rangers game over 9 runs.
Okay, there we have it again. That is almost even money, minus 102 at the DraftKings Sportsbook. And mention the high total, Jeff, in that Celtics-Grizzlies game. I like Derek White over on the 4.5 assists, but I also like Jason Tatum. I think this is a good spot for him. Over 41.5 points plus rebounds plus assists for Jason Tatum. Need Memphis to keep that game close, but I think we see plenty of scoring, and Tatum, of course, the head of the snake for the Boston Celtics. That's going to do it for the Monday edition of Prop Points here on VSiN. Make It Rain with Adam Shine coming up next here on the network. After that, Follow the Money with Mitch Moss and Paulie Howard. Then make sure you stick around at VSiN Primetime with Matt Humans and Tim Murray coming your way at 7 p.m. Eastern. We'll talk to you tomorrow.